Hi, everyone. I'm Kathryn Rose, founder and CEO of channelWise. channelWise is a platform that provides channel partners access to vetted, been there, done that experts for one on one video consultations to help them go farther, faster in their business. Today, I have the great pleasure of welcoming channelWise expert Sabine Gedeon. She's a transformational speaker, author, and coach. She is the founder of She Leads Network and the host of She Leads Now, a top rated podcast centered around women in leadership and business. Welcome, Sabine.
Thank you, Catherine. I am excited to be here and have this conversation with you.
I so much enjoy our conversations every time we have them, and I know the audience out there is going to enjoy this. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about your background, and you really focus a lot in transformational leadership practices. So let's talk a little bit about how you got to that place.
Yeah, sure. I think my experiences is what really led me to that. So traditional started corporate America right out of undergrad in HR. Worked in HR corporate for about 13, 14 years before I decided to become a dropout. And since then, I have been partnering with organizations as well as individuals. On the organizational side, it's really been to help them focus on their talent strategy overall and put in place leadership development programs or partner with them to design them. And then on the individual side, I've been working with leaders, individual leaders who either want to elevate their leadership, up their confidence, and then most recently launched She Leads Network, which is my passion project of supporting women specifically who are in leadership, who are looking to advance and elevate in every area of their lives.
Fantastic. Well, I think one of the things I wanted to talk about is, obviously the economy right now, there's a lot of transition and uncertainty and, a lot of workforce reductions happening. Um, what are some of the things that leaders can do? Like if you know that there's a layoff coming, or you're part of that those conversations, what are some of the things that leaders can do to be maybe more empathetic, or maybe really guide their employees, or if they have to have a workforce reduction, their soon to be former employees through that process?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I actually just hosted a workshop for HR leaders last week, and the conversation was really around what it means to build up your social capital and your social presence. And oftentimes in organizations, you and I know this because we're in entrepreneurship and our network is everything. What I learned during my time in corporate was that, oftentimes individuals feel like, oh, okay, I'm secure, I'm good here, right? And so that mentality of like, let me put my head down, let me just get the work done, let me just focus on that, right? Maybe I get a promotion, maybe something else happens. And then all of a sudden we have a situation like this where people are caught off guard and, perhaps didn't plan for it. And so this is going to sound really morbid, but, one of the things that I say is that, as we look, if you've lived long enough, right, you've seen these cycles of, the market changes and challenges. And the piece here is really as the employee or even as the leader, because some of the leaders have been on the chopping block, unfortunately, as well, thinking about long-term vision, right? Like change is inevitable, but it's the thing that most of us try to avoid or we're completely thrown off by when it comes, right? So from a individual employee perspective, because leaders are employees too, the thing that I say is that, similar to funding, right, for your business, you don't wait until you need the money to start, going out there. I would say it's the same thing with your career, right? You need to build your social capital. You need to make sure that you are making deposits with your network at all times and not just when you need something. So what that might look like would be, making sure that you're touching base with people that you've been connected with on LinkedIn, and it doesn't have to be, anything deep. It could just be like, hey, we haven't connected in a while. How
Right.
are things going? What's going on? And so being mindful that things are going to shift and oftentimes things are just outside of our control. So building that social capital. Now, when it comes to inside of the organization, right, we've learned we haven't learned, but it's been more widespread these past couple of years that, some of the skill set that makes leaders effective today or required to make them effective today are, skill sets around compassion, around empathy, around being a good listener, right? And so in a time like this, it's not only trying, you in terms of how you're going to communicate this to your staff, but I have yet to meet one leader who is just like, oh yeah, I just let go of 50 people and I feel great. It's not going to happen, right? And so the question becomes, how do you fill up your cup with empathy, with compassion, with the grace that you need, so that in times like this, when you have to be the one to communicate these changes or make these decisions, you're doing it from a cup that's filled, right? Not a
Mm,
cup that's empty, or not a cup that's riddled in fear or anything like that. Because these employees, they want to know that yes, you have to let me go, but at least you did it with dignity. Because guess
right.
what? When the market turns back around, and we saw this right during the pandemic, when the market turns back around, people are going to remember the ones who had to make these tough decisions, but they did it in a way that left them with dignity and left them understanding like, you are valuable here. This is just a business decision based on revenue.
Yeah, that's true. I think people do that. Oh, that Maya Angelou quote about, people remember how you make them feel, right? And there may
Right.
not be a whole lot of things that you can do. Like, here's the package. This is, but um, look, I'll give you a LinkedIn recommendation. Don't, you can count on me to give you a good, recommendation or review if someone reaches out. I think like those are the kinds of things, and like you said, trying to be compassionate through that process is really, really important. Um,
Absolutely.
you mentioned the pandemic, and I know that we've worked together in the past and on some projects, and obviously leadership has had to shift through that process. And now that we're in some ways on the other side of that, what are some of the trends and shifts that you see happening, continuously in the way leaders are showing up in their day-to-day leadership roles?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And so it starts really with really what the demand is from employees, right? Like, it's no longer okay to have a manager who just expects output, right? They want, like we just talked about, they want the managers who are empathetic, who are compassionate, who are good listeners, who care about their psychological safety. They want managers and leaders who care about them as the person. And so as a leader, in order to step into that place, you have to start with you, right? So Simon Sinek, he has the start with why.
Yep.
Well, I have start with you. What are your values? What are your beliefs? What's your vision? And then really doing the deep work of getting clear on what those are, because unless you can get on those, how are you then going to be able to communicate what your vision is? How are you going to be able to connect with someone on the same level? How will you make decisions in your organization around vendors or suppliers or whoever, if at first you're not checking in with yourself to see what aligns with me? And people can read that, right? When people are really truly living out their values, right, regardless of what they are, people feel that. You don't even have to say a word. And so biggest shift with leaders and how they show up is really starting with who they are. I've been reading a lot about, the need for leaders to be empathetic and to show up differently. And the question I always have is, how can someone be empathetic towards others when they don't know how to be empathetic towards themselves?
Themselves. That makes
How
so much
can they
sense.
demonstrate compassion to others when they don't know how to demonstrate it to themselves? And so I really do think that this is a time that, while there is a lot of pressure on leaders, having that mindset of, I'm just going to push through it and I'm just going to keep going like I have before, that's only going to lead to burnout. That's only going to lead to resentment. That's only going to increase the turnover that we've seen. My encouragement is, you are a human being
Right.
first and foremost, right? Regardless of what your title is. Take the time, get clear on who you are, and then allow that to transform, how you show up, or inform how you show up, how you influence others, and then essentially the impact that you're able to make in your organization or in your team.
Well, that's amazing advice. And for some of the folks out there, perhaps maybe a little bit more old school like myself, who are used to maybe a different leadership style, or some up and coming leaders, what are beside, obviously the empathy, but what are some of the, the ways that they can improve or elevate their effectiveness as leaders? So what are some specific tactics or strategies that leaders can implement?
Yeah, great question. So I came into corporate America and I had boomers as my leaders, right? And it was that mindset of, you leave your problems at the door, like you own your own career, like some of the messages that I got. And obviously now I support emerging leaders who, they want their companies to be a lot more supportive and play a bigger role in their mental, emotional, and everything else environment. So one of the key skills that I have been coaching my leaders around is the actual skill of coaching. And I think that, in this time, the door has been opened. You think about any great leader, right? Or any athlete or celebrity or anyone that we have put on this pedestal that they are great. They are surrounded by coaches. They have a team of people who are invested in their growth and their success, right? And so, as leaders, first and foremost, you should have, I like to call it a success circle. You should have your own success circle, right? And you should be intentional and deliberate about who you ask or invite to be that success or part of that success circle for
That's
you.
great.
And then understand that you have a role as a member of the success circle for your employees or for the people who serve in your organization. And so, what does that look like? I'll give you a perfect example. I was coaching a leader recently where he indicated that, he has someone on his team. They are very, very passionate about their work, right? And they will oftentimes get assigned something and completely geek out and go, down a rabbit hole. And when it's time for the assignment to be due, then it's kind of like, oh, well, I only got to this because, I found out this, and then I went here, and then I went here, and then I went here. And this has been happening for 2 years, right? And
Wow.
this leader, as empathetic as he was just like, I recognize he needs a little bit more hand holding and all that other stuff. I was like, that's great. That's great that you recognize that this person needs a little bit more closer management, right?
Yeah.
But how about you try this on for size? Next time you assign him a project or a task or whatever, give a specific deadline or a milestone so that it's very clear when it's due, and then ask him up front, what do you think might get in the way of you being able to get this back to me or, do whatever it is,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And in doing that, you are first, calling the elephant out, right? Like, this person's pattern of behavior. You're calling it out up front, and then you're creating a space where you can co-collaborate a solution with your employees. So in this case, it was, all right, I'm going to ask you what might get in the way. Well, I'm not sure. Or if this happens, okay, cool. So if this happens, what will you do to get past that or to move away? And you're allowing that person to stand in their genius and to
Yeah.
come up with a solution for their problem up front. What does that do on the backhand? And I'm not a psychologist, but I've studied this enough, right? Subconsciously, when that person starts to go down that rabbit hole, they are going to remember that you had this conversation with them, and that, yes, okay, you know what, I just talked to such and such, I talked to my manager, I said, if this happens, this is what I'm going to do. And they will begin to self manage, and they will begin to self coach. And that's how you get to a space where you can continue to expect and I guess bring out the best in your employees so that they're performing at the level that they need to.
Well, it also sounds like what you how you coach folks is that, you have to kind of meet people where they are, right? So that is that employee's challenge, but another employee's challenge is maybe they turn the work in too early and they don't really complete the assignment. So it's like really trying to figure out how you can get the best out of others. And, one of the things that we talk about a lot in leadership is this, ability to influence. And, obviously, as a leader, you are really the coach, right? And you need to motivate, influence, really kind of bring folks along with you. So, what would you say be like a really key skill leaders would need to master to get that desired, outcome from their team? And maybe even take it to the next level where it's not just one person, but as a cohesive team, what they
Hmm.
would need.
Yeah, you just touched on it, right? It's meeting people where they are individually, right? Listening, I can't tell you how many times, in retrospect, I can go back, and especially in the situation that I just gave you, it was very clear that this was a habitual, challenge, right? And the things that this person was habitually doing was always communicated. And so as a leader, it's really about, how am I honing in on to my listening skills? Am I listening for what they're
Mhm.
telling me the issue is? Or am I assuming that I know what their problem is? And,
Mhm.
the power of coaching, obviously, I'm a little biased because I'm a coach, right? Most leaders go into the developing of their team, or trying to get a project through, where it's delegating the task, and delegating is an amazing skill to have, absolutely, right? But also understand that you have to bring in people, gain buy-in, make it. I remember back in the day, they used to say, especially with leaders, when you were learning to manage up, that the best way to manage up was to bring forth solutions in a way that allowed that leader to believe that this was their solution, so that they can communicate it and buy
Yeah.
into it.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with your employees, right? How do you present information, or how do you present something in a way that they can receive it, they can internalize it, make it their own, and then regurgitate it, whether it be, verbally or in their work product.
Yeah, it's always that, right? To try to let the other person think it was their idea, or to get that buy-in. That's really good advice too. And I mean, I know we touched on this a little bit, but we touched on a little bit of the change that's happening, and a lot of the challenges that are out there. And let's say you're a leader, and there is this uncertainty swirling around. Will there be a workforce reduction, or you've just gone through a workforce reduction, but yet you still have to deliver. You know, how can leaders effectively navigate change and uncertainty, like within the organization, and really maintain that stability and productivity through through these times of tumultuous times, we're in?
Yeah, great question. And so, if we're talking about where we're in right now, obviously we have the financial market conditions, we have the quote unquote threat of artificial intelligence, we have all types of things going on, social, political, you name it, right? And so it's almost like pick your struggle at this case, right? Leader, this is why the leadership burnout, I think it's like 67%, because it's this much weight on them, as well as the employees. On the internal side, in terms of how you're dealing with market conditions, I remember in 2008, 2009, right, when our last big
I
recession
remember.
happened. Yes. One of the things that I appreciated, that was my very first time going through anything like that. But one of the things that I appreciated the most was that my leadership was upfront about it. There was a lot of ambiguity, right? Because we didn't know, but there was a intentionality of meeting with us regularly and saying, "Hey, this is what I know. As soon as I know anything else, I will let you know." And while the ambiguity and all of the gossip and everything else was out there, I trusted her,
Yeah.
because I knew that she was going to get back to me, and that she was going to share information as soon as she needed it. So really, we're saying communication like it's this large bucket, but it's being transparent, it's being clear, and doing it consistently in a way that you are mitigating fears, or at the very least, putting it out there of this is where things are, so people know how to react to that. Right. When it comes to other things, like I was thinking about this in terms of AI, like I'm reading employee posts, I'm reading like entrepreneur posts, right? And there's so much going on with that, right? We as humans, we fear change like nobody's business, right?
Yeah.
And so a
Yeah.
lot of people are in a space where they're fearing their livelihoods, right? And I can't even say rightfully so, but it's a change, it's a shift. So like anything else, right? When we want to mitigate fear, and we want people to focus on the bigger picture, you have to keep them focused on the bigger picture. So the statement with them, right? What's
Yeah.
in it for them?
Mhm. Yeah.
Think about it from the perspective of how can you help them to see how new technologies or new situations are actually going to benefit them.
Yeah.
When people can tie back whatever the experience is with a positive outcome or some type of opportunity for growth, I'm not saying it makes it easier for them to accept, but they certainly don't go down that dark road of, oh my gosh, the world is over.
Yeah.
So with these new technologies, are you able to demo? Are you able to test? Are you able to assign an employee and say, you know what? Here's this new one. It's kind of like what you do. It might even help your job be easier.
Yeah.
Why don't you just look into it? Like, work through it, see how it can help, and come back to me, right? Versus, letting that person stew at their desk, like, oh my gosh, like, this is exactly what I do. I don't know if I'm going to have a
Right.
job if they introduce this. So think about it from the perspective of it's still buy in, it's still that mindset of buy in, but what's in it for them? And how can you communicate it in a way where they see that value and then get them involved in it? So again, they make it their own, right?
Right.
And they
Yeah.
and they then adapt to whatever the change is a lot more smoother.
No, that's great. And I mean, like with my own team too, we look at it as an opportunity of how we can develop our folks internally because, we use the AI tools and, one of the team was a little nervous because she does a lot of our content creation. And I said, look, it's not replacing what you do. I mean, you still, it gets rid of the, blank page syndrome and there's a few things like that. But what it allows you to do is now you have to focus less on the actual mechanics of certain things and you can focus more on the high level things, so it actually is helping her develop better as an employee, right? Then she's just creating content all the time. And so I think for us as a team, we've embraced it and we talk with our employees all the time about, yes, there's new technologies coming out, we're not sure what impact that's going to have, but we all want to look at it as a positive. And if you're looking to expand your role here and take on maybe higher level tasks or things like that, like we're here for it. So I think it is like just really stepping in and making sure they're comfortable and know that, you don't have to hide that you're using Chat GPT. Like that's okay. You know what I mean? You can do that, kind of thing. So
Right.
that's really great advice. Thank you for that. And and I know you do a lot of work with women, so I'll touch on that before we wrap up. So what are some of the specific challenges that you see right now for women out there in the workforce and particularly in leadership? And how can they overcome those challenges?
Yeah, great question. I'm actually going to spin that because if we would have talked a year ago, right, I'd have had a slew of challenges. And that doesn't mean that the challenges don't still exist. But I think what has come out, or the greatest blessing in what has come out, is it's created space for women to step into their ownership of their leadership identity like never before.
Hmm.
In the last couple of years, we've seen more women start businesses than we have seen before, right? We are also seeing a lot of women, make the decision for themselves to prioritize their families, prioritize whatever in terms of like how they fit their career into their life versus trying to figure out how to fit life into their career. One of the other opportunities is really, as you think about, and we've been talking about this, a lot of the skill sets that are being demanded of leaders now, right? The empathy, the compassion, the listening, and all of that stuff, that's the exact thing that is inherent, or those are the things that are inherent to us as women. So rather than it being a period where we felt like, okay, we had to put those aside, or those were lesser traits, if you will, or characteristics that were seen as value, now they're seen as extremely valuable. So it's almost like, oh, wait a minute, this is our time. And so we can always look at any challenges. And the other thing that I want to say is, this is the unfortunate piece, but this is also, I look for the bright side of it.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of women at the senior level exit organizations, and part of that was just them reprioritizing, right? So the beauty of that, when a door opens, right, that means there's opportunity. The narrative that's coming through now is, for every woman that you lose at the senior level or the C-suite level, that means that you need two more women to fill that spot, right? And that's, depending on how you spin that, you could be like, oh my gosh, well, this will take forever. But listen to what's being said. For every
Right.
woman who's leaving, it's creating space for two
Two
more.
more.
And so
Okay.
the question is, what is your perception of this? Are you looking at it as, oh my gosh, we're losing more women at the senior level? Or are you looking at it, oh, it's creating more space to double the amount of women who are at the senior leadership level? So this is the time where, you take ownership, you take agency, right, over your career, and you start to ask the questions, how do I get up there? How do I fast track? What
Right.
does the organization have in place? What are they willing to sponsor? What am I willing to invest in myself so that I can fast track to that level?
Fantastic. Just, I mentioned at the beginning that you are an expert on ChannelWise. So just give the folks out there, the some idea of what it is that they could count on you to help them through their business challenges or their career challenges, if they had a call with you on ChannelWise.
Yeah, absolutely. So for leaders, and I say leaders, and I just want to put this out there. My philosophy is that we're all leaders, right? We just demonstrate our leadership capability in all different aspects. So if you're listening to this and you're like, "Oh, I don't manage people, or I don't have a leadership title," that's not the case here, right? So if you are an individual who is looking to advance, whether that be professionally or personally, right? Building your confidence, moving from doer to delegator, building your social capital, or even getting to a place where you can hone in your own coaching skills so that you can self coach and be more effective. That is what I help individuals with.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sabine, for being here. We really appreciate you, always as a ChannelWise expert, and of course for your insights today. Thanks again. And if thank you everyone out there for joining us. And if you'd like some deeper advice on leadership topics, please head over to Sabine's profile on ChannelWise. Or if you have any other questions and challenges that you need help with in your business, we have so many experts over on the ChannelWise platform, all ready to help you go farther, faster in your business. So thank you again. You all can head over to channelwise.com and you can find Sabine's profile. And we look forward to having another session with the expert very soon. And we welcome you to the next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathryn.